All right, the Trump administration is asking Congress for an additional $58 million for security to protect the executive and judicial branches following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. That's according to a leadership aide who spoke to NBC News yesterday, said the administration also supports adding more money to protect members of Congress, but deferred to the legislative branch on how to do it. Joining us now, Democratic Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock of Georgia. Thank you, Senator, for being on the show with us this morning.
Good to be with you.
Give us a sense of how your colleagues are responding on Capitol Hill and also the security concerns that are being addressed here.
Well, all of us should be deeply concerned when we see the specter of political violence in our country. We Americans engage in noisy and sometimes rambunctious debate, and we do that not as a precursor to violence, but to avoid violence. And so whether you're on the left or the right, there has to be a recognition that this is not the difference between left and right, it's the difference between right and wrong, which is why I thought it was so important for me earlier this week or late last week to stand on the floor of the Senate to offer my deep condolences to the family of Charlie Kirk, and to say that all of us have to condemn this with a clear voice so that we can engage in the kind of debate that's necessary to have a healthy democracy.
Let me give you some numbers, Senator, to show you how widespread this problem is. We talked about, of course, the attempted assassination attacks on President Trump during the campaign. We talked about the Democratic legislators who were slaughtered in their homes and family members slaughtered in their homes. We talked, of course, about Josh Shapiro. We talked about Jewish workers at the embassy outside of a Jewish museum in Washington. Firebombing attacks in Colorado. It's gone on and on. But just getting to numbers here. Last year, more than 9,400 direct threats were made against members of Congress, their families and staff, and the Capitol complex, according to the Capitol Police. That's more than double of 2017. And serious threats against federal judges also have doubled from fiscal 2021 to 23, according to the U.S. Marshals Service. We look at the Charlie Kirk tragedy and we mourn for his family. We look at the spate of violence over the past several years. And then we look at all of these threats against Democrats and Republicans, left-leaning judges, right-leaning judges. What do we do? How do we move back from where we are right now?
Well, here's what we certainly cannot afford to do, and that is to fan the flames of this kind of violence and this kind of conversation. And so, you know, tragically, we're seeing those who are fanning the flames. I think for short-term political advantage, nobody gains, nobody wins. When we find ourselves here, I often say that people who have no vision traffic in division. They don't know how to lead us, and so they're trying to divide us. And so I thought it was important. The reason I stood on the floor of the Senate was not in spite of my differences with Charlie Kirk. In a real sense, it was because of my differences. And they are deep. I thought it was important for someone who disagreed with him deeply to say that we cannot have this, that he deserved to live, he deserved to speak, he had a right to think, to grow, to change his mind or not to change his mind, to argue it out. And I still have enough faith in this grand democratic process in America that if we engage faithfully in that kind of argumentation and center the voices of ordinary people, eventually we get to the right place. But we don't get to the right place if we silence people's voices. I can't think of anything more anti-democratic than political violence.
Reverend Senator, the fact that we are at such a place where we've seen Democrats and Republicans or conservatives in this kind of hostile environment, talk about how important it is for unlikely people to come together. I mean, You and I come out of a Martin Luther King kind of tradition, be more activists, though I did help you. It's your first arrest, I think. You and Reverend
This is
Kevin
what happens
Johnson.
when I hang out with you. I get arrested.
A demonstration I led, nonviolent. His first arrest when he was here in the seminary. But talk about how if we could demonstrate this bipartisanship and call for it. I saw that the 4 living ex-presidents made statements about Kirk, who he attacked. I mean, Kirk attacked some of us by name. Suppose if Donald Trump had convened the 4 ex-presidents and together made a statement, how healing and how much importance that could have been.
That is the kind of leadership we need, leadership that brings us together. Ironically, in the hours after this shooting, I happened to be at a reception the other night, and for the first time, I met in person a fellow Georgian. His name is Newt Gingrich.
Wow. Yeah.
And Newt and I were having a conversation. He was sharing with me the pain and the trauma that was felt, particularly in certain circles, people in Georgia, in the wake of this shooting. And it was clear to me that I should go to the floor of the Senate and say something about this. That came out of a conversation with Newt Gingrich. Now, you know, in addition to serving in the Senate, I'm pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. And people know that Dr. King was a victim of gun violence. Not many Americans remember that in 1974, his precious mother, Alberta Williams King, was shot and killed while playing the Lord's Prayer at our church. And someone came and asked Martin Luther King Sr., we affectionately, he was called Daddy King, how you feel about this? He said, I will never let any man drive me down so low as to hate him. Hate is too heavy a burden to bear. Somehow we got to bring that spirit to our politics.
Senator, we were talking earlier on the show about why Governor Cox of Utah seems like such an unusual voice in American politics at the moment. And David Drucker earlier was suggesting that it was because Utah has a separate incentive structure for politicians, that there is an incentive in that state to be moderate, to be reconciliatory. That would suggest that it's almost impossible for figures to emerge in other states, given America's divisions and gerrymandering, to be that reconciliatory figure. Do you think we could have more Spencer Coxes in this moment in America, or is that just too hard?
We have no other choice. At some point, you've got to decide, either you love the country or you don't. You know, the American family, like all families, has a complicated story. And I can tell you as a pastor that the story of any family is always more complicated than the stories we tell ourselves at the family reunion. And so, you know, I bear the contradictions of that in my own history and story as a black man who grew up in the South. My father had to give up his seat while wearing his soldier's uniform to a teenager. But I now sit in a Senate seat. Democracy is about creating space for competing voices, for countervailing visions about what it means to be an American people. And at the end of the day, I think we have to embrace what the Apostle Paul called the more excellent way, the way of love, a people with a complicated story who refuse to give up on one another. The times call for that kind of leadership. Our children, our precious children, deserve nothing less.
So, Senator, there's a lot we don't know yet about this suspect and what his motive truly was. But two things seem to have emerged. This was someone, and we have seen this with other shooters, who spent a lot of time online in the real dark areas of social media. Please speak to that. And this is another individual. This is a country awash in firearms. He had ready access to a gun. Talk to us about that toxic combination of things and how I think so many people, including public figures, are now, frankly, really second-guessing whether it is safe to speak to someone, to have to, and even in a moment of healing, to hold an event where they could be vulnerable.
And who wins when that's the case? I mean, either you have a democracy or you have political violence. You cannot have a democracy that's awash in political violence. It is a tragic oxymoron to say political violence. I mean, the reason you engage in politics is to avoid violence. And at the same time, I'm deeply concerned about our children. I think that our whole country in many ways is gerrymandered, not just congressional districts, but the way in which we get our news, all of these silos. And then there are those who are trying to make a buck, if you will, because of these deep divisions. And, forgive me, but I'm a pastor and a senator. And, the prophet Isaiah says that the lion will lie down next to a lamb and a little child will lead them. And I often wondered as a pastor, what did he mean? It seems too idyllic. A little child shall lead them. I think what the prophet was saying to us is that here's the thing, no matter how deep our differences are, here's what even mortal enemies have in common. We all love our children. And if we will center the children, if we will recognize that my children will never be okay until somebody else's children are okay, if we center them, we'll get the policy right. And I think we'll engage each other in a very, very different way. And so my heart as a father goes out to Charlie Kirk's children, to his wife. But at the same time, I have to insist that we create a society and a country that embraces all of us.
Absolutely. All right, Senator, if you could stay with us. We do want to continue the conversation. We want to talk about what's going on in Washington and also the possibility of addressing crime in major cities with the National Guard and the like.